Hey guys! So looking back on this class, with all the discussions we've had and all the readings we've done, I've kind of come across one of the main questions and one of the main themes of the class, which is, why do people migrate? This really big overarching question is kind of what inspired my research question. My research proposal was kind of taking one of the books we read earlier in the quarter, Beyond Smoke and Mirrors by Douglas S. Massey, and seeing if those theories we learned adequately describe the migration patterns we see now. To do this, I felt that I had to look at a certain time period, so I just chose the Bracero Program of the 1940s to the 1960s, and kind of analyzing the details and experiences of some of the past workers through the lens of the theories that we learned about, and seeing if they do adequately explain why these people of the Bracero Program migrated to the United States. The second part of my question was just seeing if these mainly economic theories could actually describe all these experiences that these people had and their reasons for migrating, or if there were more reasons than just these mainly economic theories that Massey emphasizes pretty heavily. So just to kind of recap the Bracero program that we learned about, it was a program that was started in 1942 during the midst of World War II to recruit Mexican workers into the United States to do mainly agricultural work to fill kind of the employment gaps we saw with a bunch of men leaving to fight in the United States Army. The program promised certain wages and certain living conditions, many promises that were left unfulfilled, and that in turn recruited over 4 million men during the length of this program. Like I said, the program ended in the 60s, 1964, but really this program opened the pathway for so many Mexicans to immigrate thereafter. Now diving into the theories that Massey discusses in Beyond Smoke and Mirrors, and kind of how we can use these theories to analyze parts of the Bracero program. So the first theory that Massey discusses is the Neoclassical Economics theory, which basically states that a person will migrate to a different country if that country offers higher wages than their current one. Now, the whole basis of this program can be looked at through this Neoclassical Economics lens. The sheer promise of higher wages and better living conditions promised easily fits into the Neoclassical Economics theory. Obviously, a bunch of men left their home country in search of higher wages, which is the Neoclassical Economics theory. However, looking deeper into the reason so many men left Mexico to work in the Bracero program, we kind of dive into Massey's second theory, which is the New Economic Labor theory. This theory basically states that many people don't leave their country in search of higher wages just for themselves, but also to benefit the collective, whether that be family or like a different kind of like social network. In the documentary we watched towards the beginning of the quarter, Harvest of Loneliness, we see a bunch of not only former braceros but also wives of these braceros talk about how they left in search of higher wages to send back to their family. Even though so many of these men were unable to due to the unfulfilled wages or wage exploitation, that was still the overall goal of these men's migration, and so it fits pretty heavily into the lens of the New Economic Labor theory. Another theory discussed in Beyond Smoke and Mirrors is the segmented market theory. This theory touches on the phenomenon where as certain jobs are looked at as lower by certain people of a country, that these jobs will become readily available to migrants specifically, since they see it as only low people such as migrants can do this kind of work. This phenomenon, discussed in the certain case of the Bracero program, is discussed pretty heavily in the reading that we did earlier in the quarter, the Bracero program 1942 to 1964 by Elizabeth Mandel. It discusses how not only the racism from regular Americans, but also by farm owners and their constant exploitation eventually led to agricultural work being seen as migrant work. This is especially because farm owners now only want to hire these immigrants because they know they can exploit them so heavily. This constant racism and exploitation faced from Americans by the Braceros, although not ideal by any means, did in hand make these jobs more readily available for incoming immigrants, which is why it fits the basis of the segmented market theory. And then the final theory from the book that connects to the Bracero program is the social networks theory. This theory basically states that when someone comes to a country and becomes established, migrating looks a lot more attractive and a lot cheaper to the next migrant to come. An example of this theory that I found during my research was through a YouTube interview from a former Bracero. Essentially in this interview, he talks about how he worked on the same farm during the program for 15 years, and eventually this kind of led him to be able to get papers for his daughters through his boss helping him. Clearly, this man coming over to the United States and becoming established made it a lot easier and a lot more attractive for his daughters to come over as well and get their papers and everything. So this in turn would be an example of the social networks theory. Overall, after looking at Douglas Massey's theories in Beyond Smoke and Mirrors and applying them to the experiences and details of the Bracero program, I absolutely do think that his theories adequately explain why people migrate. Besides complete political peril, which Massey doesn't really touch on, I think that all the other reasons why someone would migrate, especially during the Bracero program specifically, are explained by the theories that Massey does touch on. And personally, I don't think someone would willingly migrate somewhere else if they didn't see that they could prosper economically as compared to their home country, because Massey does touch on basically every reason someone would move with the basis of economic reasoning. I think the theories that he discusses in Beyond Smoke and Mirrors absolutely does do an adequate job at explaining the reason so many people are migrating. And I think that's about everything, so